Ektachrome is finally available in 120, and I just got my very first test roll back from the lab. I sent it off to the darkroom for processing and scanning, and I just got my results in, so I thought we would take a look at those together, and I can kind of show you guys a little bit into how I metered for everything and what the results were like. I shot all of these photos on my MAMIYA 6 with a 50mm f4 lens that I'm borrowing from my good friend Corey Miller. We swapped lenses for a little bit. He has my 75, I've been shooting with his 50mm, and that's what I made all of these photos with. I really just went out for a walk and tried to shoot in a variety of different lighting conditions and metered in different ways just for the sake of testing the first roll, so hopefully this is going to be helpful for you guys if you decide to shoot some Ektachrome in 120. Or 35mm, I guess. This would really apply to both, but it's finally out in 120 again, so let's talk about that. This first photo is a shot looking down Paint Street here in Chillicothe, Ohio. I love the architecture here. I've shot photos of downtown Chillicothe a million times. If you guys have been watching the channel for years, you've probably seen maybe a similar photo to this before, but this was the very first shot on that roll. Ektachrome is known for those really strong blues, especially in the shadows, and you can see that here in the shadows on the ground and even in the buildings as well, underneath the awnings, in the windows, that sort of thing. Really harsh sunlight though, you can see the sky kind of has that gradient effect because I was essentially shooting towards the sun, but still the highlights, even in the really brightest part of the sky off in the distance, it held up pretty well. This next shot in this little alleyway between a couple buildings, I wanted to really kind of get a feel for the dynamic range of the film. With slide film, it's usually not as forgiving as color negative film, so I wanted to really just kind of get a sense of what kind of detail I could keep in both the highlights and the shadows. I took readings both in direct sunlight and in the shade there, and I kind of averaged out the two, and I ended up shooting this at f11 at 1/30th of a second. And I gotta say, I was pretty surprised. The sky in the background definitely doesn't have a ton of detail there. It's getting pretty close to being kind of washed out, but still I was surprised at the amount of shadow detail that I was able to get out of this. I was expecting a lot darker shadows and really not much actual detail there, but I just lifted the scan just a tiny bit in order to kind of pull those shadows up, and the highlights, again, they remained intact, although they are getting close to being blown out. Typically, those go pretty quick on slide film. After that, I walked into Grandpa Joe's, this little candy shop downtown. It was originally Lloyd's Sweet Shop for years and years and years, and some new owners took it over and kind of changed up the place, rebranded. It's still a candy store, but it's definitely different from what it was. This is actually my first time going into the building, and it's very, very cool. It's a super old school kind of candy shop, but they've got a lot of different kind of fun things in there. But they have this one wall on the right side whenever you walk in, and it's all of these different kinds of sodas, pops as we call them around here, and I wanted to get a photo with this, and shooting a 100 speed slide film with an f4 lens, it wasn't easy. I think I shot this at a 30th, maybe a 15th of a second, and it still probably could have used a little bit more light there, but again, I just wanted to shoot something with a lot of different color there and just kind of see how the film held up in a situation like that. This shot right here, not a whole lot to say. I was really just wanting to see how it handled the colors, from the blue in the sky, the red awnings, the yellow pole and curb there. It handled all the colors really well. They have a really nice pop to them. Kind of this building though, it has a little bit of a green tint to it. I would probably maybe spend a little bit more time kind of color correcting that if I really wanted to. This isn't really a shot I'm too excited about. I was really just trying to get a feel for how the film would handle these colors in this kind of lighting situation, but again, a little bit of a green cast there. Not too bad though. It's overall pretty true to life. Now these next two photos, I really wanted to try and push the film in terms of metering for the highlights and letting the shadows fall pretty dark, just for the sake of testing and kind of seeing how much shadow detail it would really hold up. So for both of these, I went into Roast Coffee whenever it was still at the bike shop downtown. We've since moved to the Fort Collective here, but this was whenever it was still in the bike shop and there was some really strong light coming in, and I just metered directly for the light that was falling on Greg and Branson. Both of these photos here. So for this photo of Greg, I actually metered on his right side, so where the light was falling onto him, and you can see the shadows go almost completely black. If I lift the shadows in Lightroom, you can see there's barely any detail at all there. Again, this is a really high contrast situation. There was a ton of light directly on one side and no light on the other, so I kind of expected this, but again, just for the sake of demonstration. I did the same thing with Branson. I had him sitting up on the couch by the front window, and there was only direct sunlight coming in on his left side, and I just metered directly where the light was falling on him, and you can see there is barely any detail at all on his right. That's not to say it's a bad look. It is just something to keep in mind if you're going to be shooting in these kind of situations. I'm not particularly happy with either of these. Ideally, I would have shot shot these with something where I could get a little bit closer so they would fill the frame a little bit more, so probably not a rangefinder. I probably would have used an SLR, and I also probably would have used something a little bit longer rather than that 50mm, which is more of a 35 kind of equivalent. Again, Ektachrome being known for its blues, I had to stop by Carl's, especially on a sunny day. That building just pops, and you can really see how strong the blues are here. In my top 10 photos of 2019 video, I showed that one photo of Carl's on Portrait 400, and you can see just how drastically different the blues really are. Following up on that, I wanted to shoot some more with a really blue sky in the background, so I went down a little bit further on 2nd Street and I shot photos of this red building, and I've shot photos of it before. It has a really interesting look to it, but with the red building and the blue sky behind it, I really wanted to see what the film would do in this situation, and I actually bracketed this, so I shot 2 frames. The first one I shot at f8 at 1/25 of a second, and then the second one I shot at f11 at 1/125 of a second. I reframed a little bit. I took a couple steps to my right whenever I shot the second photo. The sun was going directly against the building, and I wanted to kind of get the reflection of the sun in one of the windows, because if I took one step over to the right, it really was just kind of blasting in the reflection of that glass, and I really just wanted to kind of get that pop right there in the middle, especially considering I was one stop under from where I started on the previous photo. With the darker blue sky and that light really blasting off of that glass, this is definitely the one I preferred. There were a lot of birds flying around, and I tried to wait for the right time as birds were coming through, but of course, as soon as I really noticed that they were all swarming around, I framed things up and waited, and they pretty much stopped after that. So I got a couple birds moving in there. I would have loved to see the sky full of them, but that just didn't happen. I finished up the roll over at the Fort Collective. We were kind of in the final stages of setting up the space and getting everything ready for the soft opening, so I shot a couple photos inside there. The first photo I shot in one of my favorite spots at the new building. There's this really big glass garage door, and there's tons of light coming in from there, but also the wall behind it where there's a bar along the window. There's just tons of really good natural light here, and this photo has a really odd kind of color to it. It almost reminds me of Polaroid Originals kind of film, which is really strange to see in a roll film format. I don't know if it's sort of the green tone in the shadows. Something about this just really reminds me of Polaroid Originals film. If you also see that, let me know in the comments, but that's all I think of when I see this photo. In terms of dynamic range, I mean, it was a really high contrast situation. In the background there where the parking lot is across the street, you can see how bright it was, and there is detail there. I kind of expected all of that detail to be gone, so that was surprising, but the shadows went pretty quick. You can see inside behind the couch and everything. Obviously, I wasn't expecting a ton of detail there or any at all, so it's not really surprising, but still just something to keep in mind, again, if you're trying to pick the right film for whatever it is you might be shooting. Then I shot a photo of the coffee roaster sitting directly in sunlight there. I metered on the right side there of the frame where the sun was directly hitting it, so you can see just how much difference it was from the right side to basically the front where it was facing me. Again, dynamic range aside, I understand that slide film is not going to have as much dynamic range as a color negative film, but the sharpness of slide film when it's exposed properly, it is insane, especially in medium format. Large format is probably just too good. It would probably hurt your eyes looking at it. And finally, I shot this photo of the Good Coffee sign. This sign sits out front of Roast whenever they're open, and it was just sitting inside there leaning up against the railing, and you could see the beans in the bags on the floor there with the roaster in the background, and this was mostly just as a fun shot that we could throw up on social media. So that was my very first roll of the new Ektachrome N120. I'm obviously going to be shooting more of this. I bought 4 rolls whenever it first came out and it was up for pre-order, so this was just my first roll, but I wanted to share my kind of first impressions and really more of a test roll with you guys. That way, if you did buy this film, it might help you figure out what kind of light to shoot it in and really how to rate and meter the film. Again, not my favorite photos, but really just a test roll for the sake of demonstration. So if this was helpful for you, please let me know in the comments down below and like the video. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed already, I would really appreciate that. There are new videos every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and just whenever I have a chance to make another video like this one here. But that's it for today, so thank you guys for everything. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.